All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from the Patreons. Lots of gems, lots of isometric holds, lots of now's the time in the class when we listen to the techno, yeah? Let's get to it.
And every day, I practice martial arts. Watch out!
Yo, Dre, how you doing, man?
I'm great, Sifu. I'm very happy.
You know what's
My
great
New
about...
York Knicks won last night. I'm happy.
Nice.
Yeah,
I always
yeah.
love topical stuff when these things don't come out for like 2 weeks.
Oh, yes.
It's always great.
Oh, yes. We
Those
made it
always
to
hit like a
round
bag
two.
of old news. You know what's great? Today, I have to like look at you through this triangle
Yo, we
right
have
here.
this like
Yeah.
new technique.
It's not
you know?
easy to see you over
This is how podcasting is, gentlemen. Just look at how the Joe Rogan podcast is. They have a big mic in front of them.
That's right. And we are going to be just like Joe Rogan,
I know
spouting
Joe already
insane Bruce Lee conspiracy theories.
That's right.
Yes. So how you been, Dre? Besides, obviously, you're happy because of this. What is it? Baseball, football? What is it that you follow?
New York Knicks basketball.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we in the playoffs. We made it around two in crazy series.
Uh-huh.
So, we're moving up.
Is that the one where you use your feet or your hands?
That's with the hands.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Got
yeah,
it.
yeah.
But it's called basketball.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, is that the
goodness.
one where you got the basket on the stick?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Pretty
that's
much.
lacrosse.
No,
Oh,
that's
okay.
lacrosse?
Yeah.
Oh,
And then football is the one where you use your hands.
yes.
But
Right.
soccer is the one where you use your feet.
What's
Right over here.
what's Jai-Alai? What's that? Which one is that?
Jai alive.
You mean GA? I
What
don't know.
sport are you saying? That's a sport?
It is a sport.
Jai alive?
Yeah.
Hey, you play
Look it
Jai
up.
alive?
No,
Go-
but I do curling.
Google curling. Curling's not a sport. Come on. Anyway, so here we are.
That's Skelly in the hood. Curling.
So anyway, good to see you. We got another Ask Me Anything
We do.
episode coming up. We got a
Patreons.
couple Patreons. We also got a couple people who threw some money at us on YouTube
Super
to
chat.
answer questions. Yeah.
Wow.
And we got like one or two from the Instagram. But before we get
genius.
started, just want to remind everyone that the best way to support the Kung Fu Genius is on Patreon, patreon.com/the Kung Fu Genius for all your Kung Fu Genius podcast needs.
Yeah.
You get access to episodes early, and you also get things like my Instagram subscriber reels, all sorts of goodies. Higher levels of support are going to get some of my new historical deep dive videos, which I'm almost done with the second one now.
Ooh,
Super excited about it.
sweet.
First one, I did the
Exciting.
mytho history according to Grandmaster Gitman, his written account. And then I read it. It's like 8 or 11 paragraphs. I don't remember. And then after each paragraph, I would have some remarks based on what we know, what we don't know. And now I'm doing the same thing with some of the other traditional Shaolin accounts and so on. So that'll be available to people who are on our Patreon. I think at the $10 or more
I love
tier.
people on our Patreon.
And then if you don't want to support us over on Patreon, you can support us over here on YouTube with membership. So yeah. Anyway, so Patreon. So Mikey Deane can get some health insurance and I can retire. All right.
Fix my foot.
Dre, what you got for me, man?
Man, I got a good one. I got
Well, we'll see if it's good. You don't know. If it's good, it depends on my answer. The question might be good. My answer might be shit.
And to be fair, when you say anything's good, it's always a bit questionable as to whether it is.
All right. Yeah, you're putting that pressure on me if you say it's a good question, because if I shit the bed with an answer, then
tell you.
I've ruined it.
let me
So
tell you.
thanks for the extra pressure.
Trust.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Trust the
Thanks.
process. This is a super chat for $10.
All right.
Right?
You have to say
Beautiful.
what the amount is.
I want to shout out. I want to shout out.
We can cut that.
Yo, you
for
can
that.
get your question answer for just $10.
Thanks for that support, right? This is from Petrosi Diropoulos 4232.
Can you
right.
pass it? Let me try to read that.
You want to try to read
I
that?
just want to try to read that name.
That's a good name.
Yeah, I think I might
It's
have to have a
Greek.
go as well.
Petros Sidiropoulos. But which is a horrible pronunciation on my part. It's better than whatever the fuck you just said.
I guarantee
You
he's
try
gonna
it
say I
out.
said
Are you
it the
a
best.
Greek genius
I
over there?
guarantee he's going to
I'm not Greek gen-
say I did it the best.
Definitely
No,
Petros.
it's Petros Sidiropoulos.
Oh, there you go.
No,
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
way I said it.
Yeah, how'd you say it, Dre? Let's
just
hear
said-
that again.
Can't say it again. And if you say it like me, we
It's
know. We've got it recorded.
Petros Sidiropoulos. 42
Change that
36.
shit.
He's such a
Andrew, you got to
bullshitter.
play that back and put it in the edit so we can hear it side by side. All right.
Petrosi Diropoulos. Petrosidiropoulos.
Okay, go ahead.
Kind regards to the KFG and crew from Greece. I told you.
You didn't say that. I said that. I
What
can
is
tell by
your-
his name.
What is your opinion on the dynamic tension method as used in the Chow Gar Kung Fu and Sanchin Tensho Kata in karate? I've read somewhere that even the late Bruce Lee used it together with isometrics. Chow Gar practitioners are slim but strong. On the other hand, modern methods of training discarded. Also, please react to Ashida Kim's amorous adventures and the classic three-boobed film of David Carradine. Thank you.
So what if you could transport back in time for a front row seat into the life and legacy of one of the most respected Wing Chun masters in history? Gong Sao Wong, a tribute direct students on Sifu Wong Soo Leung, offers you just that. Through a series of exclusive conversations, 25 direct students share anecdotes, reflections, and personal stories offering in-depth understanding of the man behind the legend. Order your copy today across 12 Amazon marketplaces with free shipping. I absolutely love this book, and I think you'll find it an indispensable part of your collection. I can't recommend it enough. Get yours today. Go to Amazon, type in Gong Sao Wong, and there you go.
Three boob film, is that Death Race 2000 with the three boobs?
Yes, it is.
Okay, yeah. I've only seen Death Race 2000 once. I actually just watched it like 2 months ago. That's why it's vaguely in my memory.
It's also got Sly Stallone as Machine Gun Joe Viterbo.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I remember when I was a teenager, someone, one of my good friends, Lou, who you met, my buddy Lou, we went out to Jersey and we met him, my old childhood friend.
Yeah, he's a funny dude.
He's a funny dude. I remember I was over at his place when we were kids in middle school. And Lou was like, yo, man, I got this movie, Death Race 2000 on VHS. And I remember watching it. We were just like, because it's so violent, over the top. And like for teenagers, that's like, oh my God, that's so cool. And then I had not watched it since. And then I rewatched it like a month or two ago here. And which is the only reason I can kind of vaguely remember about some three-boobed woman.
Right.
and
Unless you're thinking of On the Moon. Oh, no. On
Total Recall.
Total Recall.
Yeah, my fantastic new movie, I don't recall. So I don't really have much to say about that. Funny thing is that he mentions, our boy Petros mentions, the amorous adventures of Ashida Kim, which we have threatened to talk about multiple times. And I forgot, now we're shooting at my place. It's probably on this bookcase somewhere.
Yeah. Not only is it on this bookcase, I can fit a very nice ottoman here, and I'm just waiting for the right silk kimono so we can do this properly.
Ooh.
Okay. However, should I maybe just read one small little taste of it to get our audience interested?
Hey, I'll read it, and then just you two.
Oh, yes, because you can do it with that proper diction.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
He's a proper dick.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Dick being the operative
So
word.
I mean, I don't have
Operative
all my
word.
books on this shelf. They are somewhat ordered by category. If you find the ninja books, which I believe are at the bottom, which is like this, it's kind of the stuff I read the most is eye level, the stuff that I usually don't. Yeah, there should be a ninja, and it is the book that doesn't have a
spine?
it doesn't have a spine because it's like
Spineless?
stapled pieces of paper. All right, the great ninja master Ashida Kim, made a color copy of 50 pages or whatever, and then stapled it together. Anyway, we'll do it properly at some point. But the amorous adventures of Ashida Kim was one of many books written by inflamed ninja master Ashida Kim,
Inflamed?
who is a white guy from Florida.
No.
With both a Korean and Japanese name. And
He's a
claimed
white
to be
guy
a
from
ninja.
Florida.
Yeah, claimed to be a ninjutsu expert. There's some hysterical videos about Ashida Kim and his various demonstrations that he's done over the years. He's an interesting character. He's like, for me, people like Frank Dukes, Ashida Kim, who's the other guy from the Black Dragon, Count Dante, and even now Steven Seagal. These are like some weird martial art guys that I can go into these weird rabbit holes on YouTube and just watch these videos that just talk all sorts of trash about these guys, or just talk about the history. Because sometimes, in the case of people like Count Dante, just like the regular history of this guy's story is insane enough. Count Dante was a guy. I think his name was like.
I've heard of Steven Seagal.
Good, as you should.
Yeah.
The Count Dante, his book is also here somewhere too. He was his real name was something Kian or something like that, and he was a guy who was kind of a fraudster, like a hairdresser and all this stuff. Who was also like a karate guy.
Hairdresser.
And then his big claim to fame was that, like in, I believe either in the 60s or in the 70s, comic books used to have like ads in them in the back. And you could like send away to get a course to like destroy any attacker in like a few seconds. And Count Dante was the guy who wrote that course. And what he taught was something called the Kata Dante. All right. Taking obviously the word, kata, the Japanese word meaning forms, and then his own fake name, Dante, Kata Dante. He claimed to be the head of the Black Dragon Society, which is, of course, like all societies, a secret society from way back in the day that you don't know anything about the origins of. But this white guy in Chicago is totally part of it, right?
Yeah.
And that this was all secretly revealed knowledge. Oddly enough, Ashida Kim, all right, later, he claimed that he was a member of the Black Dragon Society. Okay. And then, so when you see that video, which I posted on my Instagram, I think at least about a month ago, which is Ashida Kim.
Yeah.
And then the guy attacks him and then he kills it. That's the Kata Dante. That's the thing that when you sent your money order or your check to Count Dante back in the 70s, he sent you a manual that showed you how to do that. And basically the idea was like, regardless of what the guy does, it's like a series of just attacks. They call them poison hands.
Nice.
And it's like, hit him in the chin, hit him in the groin, rake his face, grab his head, stomp him on the ground. And it was like the sequence that no matter what someone did to you, whether they punched you or tried to grapple you or they were just standing in front of you, you would just go brrrr, and the guy's just going to stand there and let you kick the shit out of him. And you're going to rip his throat and pull out of his eyes and rip out the eye, spit in the socket, punch him in the face, break his arm 50 different ways with a couple little chops, snatch his girlfriend, tongue kiss her in front of him, throw her away, and then finish kicking this guy's ass, right?
That's it.
So it was like that. That was it. So the funny thing is, it seems that Ashida Kim probably bought that thing out of the back of a comic book and then learned the Kata Dante. And then a few years later, he became a ninja based off of what he learned out of a comic book thing, right?
Okay.
So Kata Dante's an interesting dude. Count Dante's an interesting dude. Also, crazily enough, you know who else claimed to be part of the Black Dragon Society?
The Black Dragon?
Frank Dukes.
Oh, Frank Dukes.
So when you see Bloodsport, the Kumite is held by the Black Dragon Society. All right. So the funny thing is, it's becoming a little bit like the ninja version of the Shaolin Temple Five Elders. It's a bullshit story to begin with, but it's now becoming it's given legs because it's in movies and in pop culture. All right, but it shouldn't. Just like the Shaolin story doesn't have any legs in actual fact, neither does this Black Dragon Society.
So
right?
This is probably a bad moment for me to announce that I recently became a member of the Black Dragon Society.
Always fucking Mikey Deane ruining it like that, right? You figured that they would have a plant in our podcast, given the kind of shit we've talked about Ashida Kim and Frank Dukes here, that the Black Dragon Society would put a plant in here.
They somehow got to him.
Yeah, don't get too close to Mikey. He'll give you 21 of his poison hands. All right. But that's just because he never washes his hands after using the bathroom.
Oh!
Ouch. Poison hands. What a great way. Yeah, I got the poison hands here, right? Okay, so we took our boy Petros' the least serious part of his question. We got that out of the way. Okay. We will do a reading of the Amorous Adventures. We'll have Mikey read it in proper, it's called RP, right? Yes. Proper diction.
Received pronunciation.
Received pronunciation.
BBC English in some cases.
Because he's a huge fan of the royal family. So as he should be. So don't even say anything because everyone knows how much you love the royal family. Mikey's love for the royal family is probably only rivaled by his love of Phil Collins.
Yeah. It's right there. It's way up there together.
Yeah.
If we weren't in the middle of a podcast and you were answering someone's question, ooh, we go off.
Hey, the royal family is a necessary part of English culture. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, I just want to put that there as a non-Englishman. I just wanted to make sure that my opinion, because my feelings are real and they're valid, and I think that
Let me tell you.
the royal family is just as important a part of your culture as Austin Powers. What were we going to say?
They have the highest rating. Whenever they do something awesome, they have the highest ratings, even higher than the Knicks Philly basketball
I
series.
hate you both.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
No, they do have the highest rating.
Say it, Mikey. Say it, King Charles. Say it.
He's his favorite.
He's
king.
your king.
He is your king.
He's not my king. The royal family will be abolished. I swear to God, in my lifetime, it's gonna happen.
It's
Good. You know what I love is slowly
Keep dreaming.
alienating various segments of our listeners. We already alienated the people who believed in Shaolin Kung Fu stories. We alienated the people who believed that Bruce Lee never had a drug habit. And now we're alienating the people who love the royal family.
This is great. We're going to be the first podcast that's actually going to, celebrate actually losing followers. We're below 10,000.
yes.
Yes, let's see if we
It
get to
happened
9.
so fast too.
Yes.
Yes, record time.
Yeah,
All right.
please
So
don't do that.
can you reread the first part of the question, the serious part?
Kind regards, of course. What is your opinion on the dynamic tension method as used in the Chow Gar Kung Fu and Sanshin Tensho Kata in karate?
Yeah, that's a great question.
So I've read somewhere that even the late Bruce Lee used it together with isometric.
It's unclear whether you're saying that Bruce Lee used Chow Ga Mantis dynamic tension or he used Sanshin tension from Okinawan karate, both of which I don't necessarily believe. No, it's great. The problem with training methods is it always comes down to the most important word, which is context. Okay. Because what people are often looking for, at least what I see, is everyone's looking for that silver bullet, that one training method that solves everything, right?
Yeah.
And when you're looking at being a martial artist, doesn't matter if in the case of most of our listeners, probably Wing Chun or Jeet Kune Do, right? But just being a martial artist, if you want to be a complete martial artist in terms on the physical side, well then there are a lot of things you need to train. All right, if you want to be a physical specimen in your chosen martial art, you need to train what I would call just general physical fitness. Like, so anyone who does martial arts or has some kind of active lifestyle should have the ability to do certain things that one would consider like necessary to be an active person. You should be able to touch your toes. You should have a certain amount of flexibility in your hips and your shoulders, especially in the ranges of motion that you need for your martial art. You should have certain structural integrity, meaning some kind of strength, core strength, the ability to turn and move and twist and stay upright when necessary, the ability to get off the ground, leg power, all right, punching power, tendon strength, all right. But then you also need to have stuff like general flexibility, which I mentioned before, specific flexibility for the style that you do. And then you have things like conditioning, and that varies from style to style. If you're in a sport-oriented martial art, then you need to have some pretty good cardio, recovery cardio, and push it to the limit cardio, right? If you're just a general martial artist, you should have good recovery cardio and the ability to maybe push the gas pedal for a minute or two if your life depends on it, right? So, and that's just on the physical side. We're not even talking about the mental aspects of martial arts training, and we're not even talking about the skill-specific stuff you need to do in your own style to get good, or, you know, the education you should give yourself as a martial artist, which should also extend beyond just that of your style. So it's really multifactorial when you talk about what a a martial artist or someone who practices martial arts needs, because it depends on the style, depends on the age, depends on the interest. But there's a lot of things if you want to be decent. You got to take in on top of the whole physical aspect, you have to do a certain amount of prehab and rehab, especially as you get older, doing things to make sure that your shoulders are in good working order and they stay in good working order. When you get little tweaks, not just going, I'm just going to push through it, but addressing it, taking care of it. So there's a lot that needs to be done in order to keep the kind of thing moving. So what happens is
well-oiled machine.
There are certain training modalities that are extremely effective for a narrow band of one of those things you might need.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you really want to improve, you want to have world-class cardio, there's really nothing better than the Concept 2 rower. Because you can go steady state, you can go all out, you use more of your body than you use with any other cardio method. It's brutal. But you can also use the ski erg. You can also use an Airdyne, like the bike with the fan on. There's tons that you can do, right? But the gold standard really is the Concept 2 rower. Just not everyone knows how to row. Not everyone can do it because of the lower back. So there are other ones that are also good. But we could do a whole thing where we just talk about what's the best for your heart health and for developing a really strong heart to be able to push and to go for a long time. And then it would be very easy to say like, oh man, the number one thing you need to do is you just need to have cardio, because ultimately at the end of the day, you got to keep your heart in good condition. All right. And then you can go into that to the total exclusion of everything else you would need to train. If you wanted to be good at Wing Chun, yeah, you should have good cardio. But if I just talked about cardio as the most important thing, you'd be missing a lot. And so when it comes to strength training, I feel that a similar thing also occurs, because kettlebells, for example, if you learn a proper kettlebell methodology, not just a personal trainer that doesn't know the difference between a kettlebell and a normal dumbbell and just has you doing normal shit with a kettlebell. I mean, someone like whether they're kind of hard style kettlebell stuff, or more like the more progressive stuff that Kenneth J does, someone who knows what they're actually doing, right? The kettlebell has so many tremendous advantages as a strength training tool. Your core, your stability, your movement, full body movement, all this stuff which we need for good athletic performance. So you could then say, all I need to do is train kettlebells and do all the different, I can get my cardio through kettlebells, which is not entirely true. I can do explosive ballistic stuff. I can do hard strength stuff. Yeah, totally. And if you just did that and you really followed through and had a good, well-rounded program, that would probably be all that you would need in addition to your normal Wing Chun training. But then we have another thing which is totally awesome: isometrics. Kenneth J, my good friend, just came out with an isometric course. And I highly recommend people look up Dr. Kenneth J, J-A-Y. Look up his courses. He's got the cardio course. He's got the movement course. And he now has an isometrics course. He also has a weight cutting course for professional athletes, because he does that for a number of UFC fighters. Mark Madsen and Nick Dalby. He's like the best at weight cutting so that they're not, in a bad shape when they go for the fight, right? Dr. Kenneth J is the man. So he has a whole isometrics course on how to use isometrics to develop raw strength, which was one of the training tools he used to become a top tier arm wrestler in Denmark.
Nice.
Kenneth J is like he's a neuroscientist, sports physiologist, really, with a deep interest in the neuroscience behind movement. But he's also a general all-around athlete, does a lot of different things, likes a lot of fight sports, and just to kind of challenge himself a number of years ago, decided to get into competitive arm wrestling. And then by using his knowledge in strength training, he was able to compete at the highest levels in Danish arm wrestling. So this is someone who knows about, so he told me about this he told me this crazy contraption he made, because, he's like kind of a mad scientist, for when he was doing arm wrestling competitions, where it's like he had his hands in some type of harness, like with a grip and a cable. And then he had a timer, at least this is the way I understood it, that would go off at random intervals. And when it would go off, it would drop a bunch of weight. There was like a pulley at the top of this harness he's holding, and there were like a bunch of kettlebells attached to it. So he wouldn't know when it was going to happen. And at some random moment, these kettlebells would just drop and it would yank his arm back and he would have to suddenly be able to stop it in that arm wrestling position, but he wouldn't know when it would happen, just so that he would be able to immediately recruit that strength and then have a pretty intense isometric contraction right away, right? And yeah, I mean, it's like crazy shit, right? So I learned a little bit about isometrics from Kenneth J. Isometrics are a great strength building tool. Because unlike, for example, traditional weightlifting, you're pushing or pulling against something that's fixed, that's not moving. You know, so imagine like you get into a deep stance, you put your two hands on a wall and you just push this wall with everything you have. That wall is not budging, but you're exerting a tremendously high amount of effort and your muscles are contracting, but they're not lengthening or shortening. They're staying the same. And it seems that, at least as far as I understood it, there are a lot of people out there who are actually educated on this stuff. But one of the benefits, at least as far as I understood it, of any type of isometric training is that it is really fantastic for improving the strength of the tendons. Yeah. Not just the muscles. And tendon ligament strength is a huge deciding factor in your output in terms of power. Because, and this is another thing that was explained to me by Dr. Kenneth J. So I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor. So anything I paraphrase, it's in my own nonsense. All right. Okay. Right. So if some of the facts are not perfect, it's not my field, right? It's something I have interest in, I've learned something about, but it's not, I can't speak with any level of authority on this. But Kenneth often talks about this relation between your brain and physical movement. Okay. That, for example, one of the reasons why we have limits on flexibility, besides there being actual impingements and shortening of the muscles or the tendons or whatever, but a big reason why you, for example, can't do a certain type of stretch to the level you want to do it. It's actually your brain that is pulling the reins on you doing that before it's your muscles telling you can't do it. And because according to Kenneth J., one of the main functions of your brain, the evolutionary functions of your brain, is to keep you from injuring yourself. Because if you imagine, if we're out in nature and you break something, you tweak something, you're going to be lunch for some, for some dinosaur. Show me on Noah's Ark where the dinosaurs were, right? There's some tiger coming at you, and you got a bum leg or whatever, right? So a big part of what our nervous system and our brain, at least as far as I understood it, has been developed to do, is to keep you from doing dumb shit to yourself that's going to make you get hurt. So when you don't do any regular flexibility exercise, and you decide to sit on the floor and do a front toe touch, and you don't normally do it, your brain is going to get, what are you doing? Are you trying to rip your lower back into pieces? Even though maybe you can touch your toes, no problem. But because your brain isn't used to it, your brain, through the nervous system, is going to pull the plug and say, no, and it's going to cut you short. Yeah. So that's why a big part of flexibility training is not just getting your muscles to be looser and the tendons and ligaments to be more compliant with the ranges of motion we want, but also letting your brain know this is okay. Yeah. We can do this, and you do it incrementally over time, and then your brain allows you more and more slack to do the things that you want, right?
Negotiation table.
Well, the same thing happens, for example, in exerting power. Okay. So let's say you have a ball in your hand and you go to throw it as hard as you can. Well, if you're not used to doing that, right? There's something that your brain is going to tell you about, like, it's not probably going to let you do full power. Now, you could override it and just do it. And that's where people who don't train often get injured doing shit that they've never done before. But the way he explained it to me is that
Caitlin Clark just did something like that. She threw a T-shirt into the stands and injured herself.
Who is that?
Caitlin Clark is one of the. She just got signed to the WNBA.
Oh, okay.
And she was one of the top players in college, but she blew up the world of college basketball.
Oh, I see. I see.
this past season.
Got it.
But she threw a T-shirt and she see her like, tweak.
Right. Yeah. Also, maybe because she's used to the weight of a basketball, then we don't have that. I mean, we get so acclimated to the things that we do all the time, right? And so the idea is that Kenneth said that your output is often limited by your tendon and ligament strength. So, and I'll do like a very basic example, which is probably not real in terms of actual, but it illustrates the point. Okay. So let's say, for example, you do a bicep curl, all right? And your muscle can curl a 50-pound dumbbell. Yeah. All right? Which would be amazing. But the bicep tendon, it's not quite that strong. It can only really maybe handle 30 pounds. So even though your muscle is strong enough to handle 50, your tendon's only like 30. So he says then it'll probably only let you lift 25 to keep you below that threshold of where you're going to get injured. Okay. Right? By the way, that's actually a reason why that's a huge bodybuilding injury. The bodybuilders get the bicep gets detached and then it rolls up into their shoulder. Because when they're taking anabolic steroids and their muscles can grow at such a rapid rate, because your muscles develop at a much faster rate than tendons and ligaments. Yeah. The bicep very quickly exceeds the tendon's capacity to hold that. And then while they're doing all these bicep curls, the tendon gives out because the muscle's too strong. It's pulling too hard and it rips, right? So that's also coincidentally the reason why you sometimes see people who are very skinny and sinewy, but are extremely strong for their height and size. Like Bruce Lee or like Ethan in Brooklyn, right? You look at these guys, they're like, they don't have any body fat on them, right? But their tendon ligament strength, and you can see in like the shape of their hands and stuff like that, is very high. And that's why they have a proportionally very high amount of output. And that's because their tendon ligament strength to muscle strength, that ratio is very high on the tendon ligament strength side, right? So isometrics really fit the bill for training this type of strength. But to come back to my whole kind of like silver bullets argument, the issue is that isometrics, whether you're talking in Jiaoga Mantis about the forms that they do, because when you use that kind of tension, even when you're using it in the air, that's still a form of isometric training. And also Jiaoga Mantis has a lot of partner exercises where you're kind of pushing and it's very isometric based training. I trained in Jiaoga Mantis for a whole summer in Hong Kong with Sifu Li Tianloi, who's one of the, in my opinion, he's one of the best. Not just because I learned from him, but I researched him before I learned from him. I didn't just go to him because I couldn't find another one. I did my research. Okay. And as I mentioned a number of times on the podcast, I think he's probably pound for pound one of the strongest people I've ever met. He's a little shorter than me, and he has a narrower build than I do. Like he's a little narrower than I am, right? But when you just feel his grip, when he grabs you or when he holds you, it's like it's just like an adult just grabbing like a child-sized toothpaste and squeezing it out. He's so strong. Okay. And you know, when he gets his hands on you, you can feel the strength is really quite palpable. And that's because most of their strength training is some kind of isometric based training. Okay. But again, when we come back to the silver bullet thing, so is strength output the sole factor that you want to focus on in your strength training regimen outside of the martial art you train? Okay, if it is, then maybe that some type of isometric training is the best way to go. Because again, the isometric training, like the Jiaoga Mantis guys, they use their partner to do isometric training, but their form, because it's so hard, is a form of kind of static self isometric training. It's not quite the same because you're not pushing against something, but they tense and squeeze everything. And so they're creating these really strong isometric holds. There is a photo of Bruce Lee actually in his very early days, I would assume is the late 50s, maybe the early 60s. So most likely when he's in Seattle, and he's actually in some of the Jiaoga Mantis poses. And you see occasionally he would do the Phoenix Eye Fist, which is also a very famous Jiaoga mantis pose. People sometimes get confused a little bit about mantis because there's a northern mantis and a southern mantis. And when most people, if you've seen mantis in the movies, they're thinking of that mantis where the hands are like in the hooks like this. Okay, that's northern mantis. It's like Tatsing Tonglong, right? Which is the 7-star northern mantis, right? And they're using the hand like a hook, right? Southern mantis isn't like that at all. Southern mantis, you're square, just like in Wing Chun.
Oh, right.
And back is rounded, elbows low, like in Wing Chun. But they primarily use the Phoenix Eye fist, not entirely horizontally, not vertically, like 45 degrees. And they use other types of grabs and stuff. So it's interesting. Northern mantis, in my estimation, looks visibly like a mantis because of the hook. But the southern mantis guys, they fight like a mantis fights, like where they just suddenly pounce on you and kind of constrict, you know. So yeah, it's pretty impressive. Those guys are very strong. So it's possible that Bruce had picked up some mantis here and there. There's been a long sold bullshit story that Bruce came to New York in the 60s and learned mantis from I think he's Jin Fung Mark Jin. I really apologize for not knowing his name. I don't know any of the American mantis guys. I only know the guys in Hong Kong. Jin Fun Mark. I'm not sure. Something like that. All right. He was kind of a big deal in the mantis scene over here. And of course, he claimed that Bruce Lee came to him in the 60s and then he was defeated. And then Bruce started learning mantis from him. Because, you know, whenever someone becomes famous in Kung Fu, you just got to wait 10 years after they're dead. And then someone will tell you, oh, yeah, you know what? We actually taught these guys, like the Siulam Wing Chun people. They wait 30 years of Yip Man to be dead before they start telling people, oh, you know, Yip Man was actually coming to us and secretly learning from us, right?
Oh, no.
Cool story, bro. Yeah. All right? It's not the story that's told in Hong Kong, though, but it's easy to sell this to Westerners. So to kind of circle back, it's all contextual. Do you really want to have strong grips? Do you want to have a certain type of tensile strength in your martial arts training? Is that what you want? Then isometrics might be it. So could deadlifting, so could conventional strength training. It's a matter of what are your goals, and then aligning the training methods that you choose to be the ones that will help you achieve that goal, rather than going, which is very typical in the fitness industry. It's like, oh, this thing is really big now, so let's just do that. Oh, but now it's this thing, let's just do that. Oh, now it's this thing, let's just do that. And it's just jumping from one fad to the next. There's enough information out there that we know what the best methods are for training cardiovascular systems, for training muscular endurance systems, for training raw strength, for training dynamic strength, for training athletic movement. Yeah. There's enough out there. And this field keeps growing, in my opinion, in a really good way. The fitness industry in general, not so much, but in terms of the types of information and movement science we have now, it's really, really good. But to say that isometrics is then the only thing, and this is now the only thing you need to do because Bruce Lee did it. I mean, if Bruce Lee had found another method, he would be using that. You know, it's just, he only lived for 32 years. It was to know what he would have done if he stayed alive and what else he wouldn't have figured out. And he wasn't loyal to these methods. He was loyal to what was going to help him improve. And if something better came along, it would be that. And we can't just say, well, at the time of his death, he was this way, therefore that's the final say, right? Well, maybe for Bruce, but not for the rest of us who are still here. All right, what else you got for me, Dre?
Oh, wow.
So if you're not local to NYC, one of the easiest ways for you to improve your Wing Chun training is to train online with me. Online private training is tailored toward the individual and geared towards serious practitioners who want to improve their skills or knowledge base. I offer 2 private lesson subscriptions, twice a month and 4 times a month. Kung Fu Genius listeners use the code KFG Online to get 1 online consultation lesson free with the purchase of any subscription. That code and the links are in the description below. Online private training is a convenient way for you to ask any of the questions you've had about application, form, theory, or even how to teach. Bring a partner to train with you online at absolutely no extra cost. I'll show you how to train with your partner online. Again, use the code KFG Online to get a free consultation lesson with the purchase of any online subscription. Links are in the description below, and I'll see you online.
Told you it would be a good one.
I don't know. You got to let the audience decide that.
That's all right. MGK22.
All right. Machine Gun Kelly.
Yeah, that is him. 22. Sifu Richter. Do you think it's possible for someone who, say, has been practicing Wing Chun for 30, 40 years and learned everything up to the long pole, but never learned the butterfly knives, could learn them from videos?
You've known me long enough. You know what I'm going to say first. You know what I'm going to say first.
I don't know.
Yes, you do.
I don't know.
What am I going to say first? So I'm going to take issue with some wording in that question.
The knives, yeah.
Mhm. So,
well,
hold on a second. I'm going to go grab 2 pairs of knives.
Oh,
Right, okay.
yes.
Okay, so first of all,
Still hooking up with it.
Wing Chun peeps.
Yeah.
Should really stop calling them butterfly knives. All right. I have a feeling it's like it's a little bit like telling Americans not to call tissues Kleenex.
Why is that, Steve?
Well, I don't know. So the particular parlance in Wing Chun is that we don't call them butterfly swords. Yip Man himself did not call them butterfly swords in his 2 interviews. All right. It's simply Patang, though is the name of the form. You could also call the knives that we use Patang, though you could actually use the same name for the form and attribute it to the knives. Although specifically we call them Bao Chang Do. Bao Chang Do is the knife that goes to your elbow. Because when you flip them like this, and this is only for people watching us on YouTube, because if you're listening to us on audio, this will be as useless as one of Dre's monologues. So when you flip it here in your hand, then the knife should come at or almost to your elbow.
Almost.
I prefer them actually slightly shorter.
Yeah.
Because the way the knives are too long, when you're moving with them, it becomes a bit of a hazard, right? It's better to have them short, right? The particular knives we use, again, they're called Bao Chang Do, or just simply Seung Do double knives, right? And they should go to about your elbow. In the Wing Chun system, in the Yip Man Wing Chun system, there are a few different designs. The Moyat lineage has almost like a triangular shaped blade, which I think is really cool. But most of the Yip Man guys tend to have kind of smaller knives, right? They're not like really big choppers, right? And in the Leungting version, you have a flat bottom like this, and kind of a long but narrow hook. The blade is kind of broad all the way through to a tip, so it could also be used for stabbing. But the main feature is that the handle is in line with the tip of the knife, okay? Which allows for certain angles, the way we like to chop, the way we like to stab. So those are a couple features of the Wing Chun Patang Do knife that are different from the knives of other styles. Now, I don't care if there's no historical evidence that the Patang Do or this type of knife fighting exists before Yip Man, because I'm firmly of the opinion that the Patang Do was Yip Man's own development, right? Oh, okay. Therefore, the knives that he wanted to use or preferred for his way of using them is kind of up to him. Yeah. Because the moment I say this, people go, well, if you look at the Small Sword Society, they were really long and then it looked like they're little. I'm not saying we're a descendant of that. I'm saying whatever we're doing, it's our own thing. And this is like within the own lore of our own Yip Man Wing Chun world. All right. Butterfly swords. Wu dip do. Wu dip. Wu dip. Wu dip is butterfly. They have many different shapes, but here's an example. Now, the first thing you will notice is that the handle is not in line with the tip. The handle is in the center. Yeah. This one is a short hook. Some have longer hooks. It's longer. It's actually longer than my elbow here. Okay. Which is neither here nor there because you can get them longer or shorter. But it's a slightly different design, and the weight is different. And so, in Wing Chun, the knife form is called Patang Do. We often just euphemistically say the knives are also Patang Do, or we say Seung Do, or you can say Bao Chang Do, but do not say butterfly swords, okay? Because because butterfly swords are butterfly knives. The thing is that character is not any different in Chinese. The term Do, right? This almost sounds like Homer Simpson, right? Do. It means a broad sword or blade. So what is do mean? Do means that it's sharp on one side, not sharp on the other.
Mhm.
That's what it means to be broad, because it's wide. And you don't use both sides to hack. You use one side to hack. So it's one-sided with a broad blade, like I said, sharp on one side, right? So for example, a samurai sword, okay, is a type of do, because it's sharp on one side. It's only used that way there, right?
Mhm.
But if you look at like a fencing foil, which is narrow, or in Chinese martial arts, the Tai Chi straight sword, like in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon,
Mhm.
that has the blade on both sides. That's called a kim.
Kim.
Kim is a
Okay.
straight sword where you can use both sides, all right? Do just means any sword where you use one side. But for example, a butter knife. Think about a butter knife that you use it for breakfast.
Yeah.
It's also a do.
Uh-huh.
So they use that do for that one. They use that do so it can be used for knife, can also be used for sword. So that's why whether people want to say butterfly swords or butterfly knives, if using the term do, it can be either. Okay? Because what is the, when you look at something like the Wing Chun Bacham Do, is it a knife or is it a sword? All right? So Siva Leung will often call these short broadswords. All right? The long knives are short broadswords. All right. So, I mean, it's a little bit, it's kind of a semantics discussion, right? But in any case, in Wing Chun, in Yip Man Wing Chun, you should not call them butterfly swords. That's just the sign of someone who read a Wikipedia entry, right? It just comes off that way, right? I know some Wing Chun sifus teach that. Don't forget that many Chinese instructors who came to foreign countries to teach are not native English speakers. So they would just use whatever common terms were used for these things to get the idea across, right? For example, sticking hands for qi sao, right? First of all, sao can mean either hand or arm. So what are we really sticking with when we do qi sao? It's really the arms, not the actual hands, although we can stick with the hands. And qi doesn't mean stick, it means to cling.
Yeah.
So a better definition would be clinging arms as opposed to sticking hands. But if you did not speak English, if that was not your native tongue,
Yeah.
you only knew a little bit of English, you're
So, yeah,
a
that came about,
Hong Kong
yeah.
Wing Chun instructor and you come to the States in the 70s to teach. Sticking hands. It's very easy to see how the somewhat oversimplified translations can then become part of the vernacular, and they're just then accepted by every generation afterwards, even though it's maybe not really accurate to the idea, right? If you think about clinging, if you're using your arms to cling to your partner, this is a much more, I think, correct, adaptive, and proper term for what we're doing when we're doing qi sao, as opposed to just sticking, right? So anyway, the question was whether after 30 or 40 years of training, having learned everything up to the long pole, can you teach yourself the Bacham Do from the video? So I don't know any sifus that really teach the Bacham Do in any kind of detail in video. Okay. If they're teaching the Bacham Do on video, given its high position in Wing Chun, I would tend to maybe doubt its authenticity. If they're teaching it on video and that video is an hour long and it has both the long pole and the Bacham Do in the same video, then I would be very skeptical about the level of depth and detail.
Okay.
All right, because there seems to be a bit of a misapprehension among Wing Chun people in the general Wing Chun world that learning the Bacham Do means you learn the form.
Oh.
You can wipe your ass with the form if you don't know how to use the knives. You don't have a functional idea. You haven't done any basic sparring. You don't know, at least in theory, how it's supposed to work.
Right.
Then you're just pantomiming movements in the air with two knives in your hands. But doing a form, regardless of how secret or authentic or special it is, doesn't imbue you with fighting skills with that weapon. Right. When we do the Bacham Do at City Wing Chun, the way we teach it is, first you got to do some basic strength training to make sure that you know how to cut and to stab and to do some basic deflections and defenses and some footwork. And you got to do that before you even learn the form. You got to learn how to hold the knife. How would you cut? How would the knife move? How would you go in? Like it's not just like, I'll put this thing in your hand in here and pantomime some movements. Like the angle that you hold the knives at, the way you cut, all those things, you have to know that stuff. even if it's just theoretical, even if you're not using it, but that is part of learning Bachamdo. Then you learn the form. Then you hopefully learn the application. Why do we do the kapdo this way in set 1? Why do we have the seongpekdo? Why do we stab? Why is the yijido done in such a low position instead of high? Why is the tando done down here instead of up here? Why? Because you're going to learn the application. You're going to learn why. Okay. So I have not seen a video that shows the Bachamdo in any detail of any of the lineages. All right. Even though their Bachamdo may be different from mine, I don't say, oh, it's different, so it's wrong. I just go, even for that style, it seems like they're not really teaching the nitty gritty of how to do it. It's just some guy there in some Yip Man costume demonstrating a form and then showing a couple weird, obscure applications and then going, okay, that's the knife. That's all you need to know. This is our martial heritage.
Okay, I'm done.
It's 8 sets of pantomiming shit with 2 knives in your hand, and then some weird defenses against weird attacks. And okay, there you go, you mastered the system.
Yay.
I mean, is that really it? Or is there something a little bit more concrete, right? So, I don't see why someone with his credentials of learning 30 to 40 years should not be qualified to learn the Bachamdo. I just don't know if the video is the best path for it. There was a video on Everything Wing Chun, a video series by these 2 very, very funny European guys claiming to teach the Leungting knives. And when you've seen some of the videos, this is not the form, it's not the application, not even holding the knife right, not doing even the basic jamdo right. And those are people who are claiming to teach in my lineage. And it's not remotely correct, all right?
Ooh. So the question I have for that, though, is that like now, it's like you can get that everywhere. Like, how does one get away with that? I mean, I know that everyone, the old wives of like, Kung Fu in general always go on whose lineage is better than that. Right. But like even within our own lineage, right, no one's calling that out.
Well, first of all, I mean, I don't like no one really cares for the most part. I mean, like the reason why I say it is just because when I say this, someone in the comments might say, well, doesn't so-and-so put the Leungting Bachamdo series at Everything Wing Chun or whatever? And no, I mean, that what they're doing there is something like it. But it's like the details and it's not the Leungting Bachamdo, right? And the reason why with the knives there's all this like, it's the same thing with Yip Man. It's like this plausible deniability. If you teach it to so few students in any kind of detail, then no one really knows if what those guys are doing is correct or not. And if you have a bunch of people who left the organization before they had the chance to learn the knives and they just want to learn the knives, well, I mean, yeah, cool. I can buy this guy's video series and do that shit by myself in the air. And then now I know the knife form and the applications, right? And then they can use that to quote unquote complete their own training, right? But they don't know that maybe that doesn't speak to the level of quality of what they might have learned if they were able to learn it from a more qualified source, right? It's no one is going to say anything because most people don't know, and the people who know kind of laugh it off and don't say anything. Right? Okay, or maybe we watch these videos for a good laugh. Yeah. Right? Yeah. My boy Christian loves to do stuff like that to me. He loves to torture me with these kind of videos. So yeah. So what else we got, Dre?
To you and then he knows you're just watching it in disdain. I don't have anything.
Is that all I gave you?
That's all I.
What a dick. All right. And here I am going like you're going to give me more. Yeah, we had 2 questions. Hey, we actually answered those questions last time. So let's talk about a couple things here before we get out of here.
We didn't. Well, you kind of answered. Well, one of them we consigned to the.
Okay, here I'll let you reread those last 2 questions.
The one
I didn't have any time.
Yeah, the one from Roberto Santiago was consigned to the theory class because it was a theory question. Yeah. But the other one we kind of just skipped over. So read it again, and if we've got a deeper dive, let's see what happens.
Jonathan Owens,
Patreon.
Can you tell us what a daily class in the castle was like? And did it differ from how Leungting ran his classes? And was there any particular part how these classes were ran that made an impact for your learning?
it's a great question. We tried to answer this and then the other question in the last episode, but we ran out of time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I said, I consigned the Roberto question because it was a technical Wing Chun question, which I prefer to do on my monthly theory Q&As.
And he's there. He's going to be
if
there.
you guys want the link for that, that's in the description below. I do a monthly Zoom. It's on Zoom. We do usually the first Saturday of every month. And it's about an hour long. For the first 15 minutes, I'll discuss a topic in detail. And then for the remaining 45 minutes, I just take questions from the audience.
Classes.
They're either our own students from our branches outside of New York, or they're other people
It's
from
so eye-opening.
all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so there I will answer technical questions, bong cell problem questions, training questions. I would also do some of the stuff I do on the podcast, but maybe.
And then you go into a nice long Q&A, which is everyone has great questions.
I feel I can go into it in a little more detail because I really have a captive. Like with the podcast, it's a slightly more general audience.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who are doing my monthly theory Q&A class, they're really like Wing Chun nerds.
Yep, and
so
they're
I can
asking right there.
Yeah. And I can give them the questions. And if I have a partner there, I can demonstrate. So, people want to ask the KFG technical martial art Wing Chun questions.
Right. That's the place to do
That's the place to do it. So with the monthly theory Q&A class, I'm thinking of putting some of the past, because we record them. So if you have a subscription, which is only like $13 or something like that, you get the link every month for the free class.
Yeah.
And then you can ask me questions because you're in the live stream, and then it's recorded, and then we throw that up there for the people who want to watch it afterwards. So if you have the subscription, you can both participate, but you could also watch the class. So if you missed it, you could still see it. And there's tons of stuff that I talk about in there. We started doing that since the virus of unknown origins. We now have a very large library of that kind of stuff. And I like that because I can really go into the geeky Wing Chun stuff in a little bit more detail. So the theory Q&A classes, I'll probably for the YouTube subscribers at the $9.99 level, or for the Patreons that are at the $10 level, I'll start putting the older ones on there. But if you want the subscription, you got to go to the website, citywingchun.com. Wing Chun, TSUN, by the way.
There it is.
So that's why I don't answer technical questions, because people forget half of the people who listen to this podcast listen to us on audio.
Oh, yeah.
So you can imagine a podcast where I'm going like, hold your hand like this, then move your arm this way, then go the people who are sitting in their car listening doesn't make any sense, right? Yeah. Besides, I always felt that this podcast should be a place for discussion and do it a little bit differently than maybe some of my contemporaries. And if people want technical stuff, you can do lessons with me on Zoom. You could do my monthly theory Q&A class, or you could just haul your butt to New York and come and learn. All right, I'm here. I do not earn a living doing a podcast. I earn a living teaching martial arts. All right, if that's what you want, then come and get it. I'm there. All right, I'm more than willing to teach people who really want to learn.
Dre earns a living doing a podcast, though. Well, he actually earns a living doing other people's podcasts behind our backs.
Behind our back.
So the question then, the other question was about my time training in Germany at the famous Langenfeld Castle, which I had trained there for 3 years, from 99 to 2002. It was 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. So it was I was a professional Wing Chun student in the learning system.
Yeah.
We talked about this, as I mentioned in the last podcast where we didn't have time to answer this question, that I've actually done at least 2 episodes on castle stories. I know I did one, but I think there were 2, right? And I actually talk about, like what the day-to-day was like, and some funny stories with Sifu Ben Wagner, some stuff with Sifu Heinrich Pfaff and Thomas Schrön and all these guys.
All your buddies.
Yeah, really, really, really funny stuff. I don't think that I told the pubic hair story, though, or did I?
No, I believe that you are still keeping that one.
Yeah, I only tell that story privately.
Yeah. You always allude to it, but then you're like, no. Yeah.
Well, who knows? That guy still might be watching, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, but to kind of recap, I mean, the Western way of teaching Leung Teng Wing Chun is quite a bit different from the Hong Kong Chinese way of doing Leung Teng Wing Chun. And both methods have their pros and cons. I'm definitely more of a Hong Kong style Wing Chun guy, but I teach things in a more modern and kind of Western pragmatic way. So that might be some of the influence from the EWTO. But I don't teach things exactly the same way as I learned in the EWTO. We had, through most of my time training at the castle, I had two really fantastic instructors with Sifu Bernd Wagner, the late Sifu Bernd Wagner, and Sifu Heinrich Pfaff. They were two of the top guys in the EWTO at that time, and it was a blessing to come and see these wizards in action every week, right? And then at some point, it was either a year or two into my training, Sifu Heinrich left the castle, and he was still part of the EWTO, but he left the castle to build his own school. Because he had only been teaching at the castle as like an employee. And he wanted to have his own school. So then he built his own school. So then for like the last year or so, I would once a week, I would drive over to Heinrich Pfaff's school. So I would be at the castle then 4 times a week and at Heinrich's one day in like a special 5-hour class I would go to. It was pretty awesome. So 4 or 5-hour class was pretty dope. But for all intents and purposes, it's basically Sifu Bernd Wagner, Sifu Heinrich Pfaff, those were the main guys. And then Sifu Thomas Schroen, who came in and taught me quite a bit. So those were like the 3 main guys, but we would have all the different masters coming to the castle. So we would have like Sifu Tazos or Toranata 7 or Sifu Frank Ringeisen, Thomas Mannes, all of these guys. Obviously, Sifu Reiner Tausen, who's a good friend of mine. It would be great because I would then get all these inputs, and I think that's why I've always had a very within the Wing Chun culture, I had a very multicultural take on it, because while I was in Germany at the castle, I wasn't only learning from Sifu Bernd and Heinrich Pfaff, but I would also see the different masters, and I got to see different approaches and figure out different ways that would kind of benefit me, and that was really beneficial for when I later learned from Sifu Leung Teng and put a lot of things into perspective. But the training, it was 6 hours a day. We had 2 3-hour segments. So you would get there in the morning, you would train from 10, it was a 10 element, so from 10 to 1. And then there would be like an hour and a half break usually. And then you would train from like 2:30 to 5:30.
Yeah.
And so it was like a full day. So great. It was interesting because I didn't know it right away, but Heinrich Pfaff and Bernd Wagner didn't like each other. And they were like our 2 main instructors, right? But it would be like you would have Sifu Bernd all day, and then on Monday, and then Tuesday was Sifu Heinrich, and then Wednesday was Sifu Bernd, and Thursday and Friday was Sifu Heinrich. So we had Sifu Heinrich for like one day more than we had Sifu Bernd. But we had Sifu Bernd first on Monday, and he would teach something, and Tuesday we'd come in and Sifu Heinrich would be like, "So what did Bernd show you yesterday?" And then we would show him. And then he would just like demolish it. He was like, "No, you can't do it like this. You got to do it this way." So our Tuesday lesson was always like, was always debunking what we learned on what we spent 6 hours doing on Monday. And then sometimes Thursday was a little bit like that too, right? That is so it was interesting because that, but what's weird is that Germans have a really hard time with variations. Right. And I can say this without being canceled. I'm half German. Look at my last name. Jesus Christ. All right. Okay. I lived in Germany for 3 years. I speak passable German. I can talk shit about Germans. Okay. Plus, I don't think anyone gets upset when you talk shit about Germans. All right. No. But there's a couple things about the German character that I'm fully aware of and can say openly. All right. There's a seed in the German character that is the reason why they're such great engineers, why they can build such amazing cars. The Germans have something about being accurate, about being precise, about there being no ambiguity. All right. And that is something that I can totally respect and get. All right. But it's also why sometimes they have a little bit of an issue with something with so many subjective topics like martial arts. Okay. Because even within Wing Chun, which can be presented in a very logical and scientific way, there's still so many subjective parts to it because it's still a martial art where one Sifu may prefer to move in a certain way because it kind of feels a little bit better for them. The other Sifu likes to use more kicks because they got good legs. The other one doesn't like to use kicks. So they use their hands more, and the other one likes to do the. So the thing is, it's like as much as you would like to say it's all just logic and straightforward and systematic way of fighting, it's still a martial art. Right. All right. And that's where you start to see this clash for the Germans between like a martial art and personal expression, and then what's supposed to be a systematic way of fighting. Because I never fully bought into that, because that was a very German way of looking at things, a very systematic way of fighting, which you could say is in the principles. It's not in the technical execution.
Right.
That's fine. And I would agree with that. But when you would see Faulkner do an old demonstration, you would see Amin do it, you would see all these different guys doing it, you would say, yeah, I can see that it's the same art, but it's expressed different ways. So I never had this thing like, oh, I need to do it exactly this way or exactly that way. So I reveled in the fact that I had two different instructors who were going at each other's throats to show a better way of how to do everything.
Uh-huh. When did you figure out, or how did you figure out that they didn't like each other?
By week 4.
Week 4.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, and would Sifu Bernd debunk Sifu Heinrich?
No, that was not in Sifu Bernd's character.
Right.
Sifu Bernd was he was kind of a man after your own heart, Mikey. He
liked techno.
He liked techno. He liked going clubbing. He was the funny thing is he was older by a couple of years than Heinrich Pfaff. But of the two, you would always think Heinrich Pfaff was older because he had a little bit of his martial arts were like amazing, but like personally, he has kind of old man energy.
Yeah,
and he can be a bit of a Debbie Downer. But Sifu Bernd was like, was always playing techno music, and he had his blonde hair, and he would wear his like Wing Chun uniform, but in the summer he'd have like a cap on, and he'd be like super. He was super hip, right?
Okay.
He had like a BMW Z3. He was a cool dude.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. I'm sure he also had his issues with Heinrich, but I never heard him say like, "Oh, what did Heinrich show you?" Or like, "Oh no, you can't do it that way," or whatever. Some people would bring that up to him because Germans would always have an issue. Because I remember I made this joke with the German ones at the castle, and I could just see their brain melting. As an American, you would understand what I mean by this, but Germans don't, at least not the ones I met. A question came like, hey, Heinrich said we have to do it this way, but Sifu Bernd said we have to do it this way. Right? Like, which one is the right one? And I'd say yes. Which like you would totally understand that when I say something like that, I mean like, well, they're both valid. You could do it that way, or you could do it that. Like you would infer that right away from my sarcasm. and the German just looked at me and said, like they couldn't like you cannot have two opposing answers to the same question. This is not how we build BMW, right? And the idea that and there would be some crazy arguments between them.
Yeah.
Like in things in Chiu-A, whether when you did this attack you had to turn or just shift your body or you did directly. This would be like lobbing like cannonballs at each other from day to day.
Okay.
So we would do a certain like the first attack with a shift on Monday, and then with Sifu Heinrich we'd have to do it with a turn, and then we'd have to and then go back on Monday we'd have to do it with a shift again, right? And so but what I saw in that, because I was never because the Germans would get really pissy about that. Sifu Heinrich said we should do it this way, and Sifu Bernd would be like, okay, that's fine. And then they go to Sifu Bernd said we should do it this way, and then you would see the same dudes, like the same instigators, playing off of that every day. The same guy who would go to Sifu Heinrich like, oh, well, Bernd said we should do it this way, and this way is wrong. Was the same guy who was doing it to going to Bernd talking about Heinrich, right? It was like these little gossipy dudes, you know what I mean? And I thought that was kind of being a bit of a bitch.
Yeah.
But I didn't say anything. You know why? Because it forced both of those instructors to bring out their A game. Because they know to a certain degree they're being judged. Yeah. Okay, like if Sifu Heinrich would show us to do it with a shift, for example, then he'd go into detail on why you got to do it this way and the angle and how you go forward and all this kind of why you need to do it like that. Because he wanted to give you bulletproof reasons so that the next day, if someone brought it up to the other guy, you would be able to say, well, maybe bring up a bunch of stuff they hadn't thought about, right? Yeah. So I benefited from that, from this clash of opinions and differing views on the same thing. But some of the Germans just like, ich komme nicht klar. I can't deal with it. Like the contradiction. And I'd be like, oh my God, how lucky they are they didn't learn from Sifu Liang Teng or learn from a Chinese instructor. If you want to understand masterclass in dealing with contradictions, you should have a Chinese instructor in martial arts. Okay. Because this is the way it is. You know what I mean? So anyway, but great questions. But like I said, I did a couple episodes on that back in season 1. So you might want to look up Castle Stories 1 and 2 back in season 1 to get more I don't want to, just say all those things over again. I think I did a pretty complete job there. And I also talked about some personal stuff regarding what happened to me in Sifu Heinrich and things like that in the years afterwards.
So how did it differ from Leung Ting, the way Leung Ting ran his class?
Well, there's a lot less structure when you're dealing with Sifu Liang Teng.
Mm-hmm.
A lot more focus on basics.
Yeah.
Because, Sifu Heinrich and Sifu Banter were always trying to outdo each other. Yeah. So they would go into like all these details. And then sometimes they would just straight up show us stuff from more advanced programs just to go like, let me show you this or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But with Sifu Liang Teng, it's like, no, do this. Nope, you can't do it right yet. Keep doing it again. Then when you can do it, okay, do the next one. And he had no bones about whether he bored the shit out of you or not.
Okay.
All right. And he never bored me. But I can imagine if I taught the same way he did, some regular people who are not fully invested would be bored. I loved it because I love like basics and do it again. And no, not quite right. No, not quite right. Keep going. But the idea is to merge something between the two ways of doing it, rather than overcorrecting and throwing all these details on top of details,
right,
or just making the student do one thing without a lot of correction, just until it's ambiguously better. I think where you often get into trouble in these conversations about what's best in martial arts is that most of the conversations tend to hang out at both extremes of the argument. Right. So do you teach in a modern way or in a traditional way?
Right.
Are those really the only two options? Okay. And what traditional means for one person, it doesn't mean for someone else. For some people, traditional means authentic and better and the right way and focused and, on details and step by step and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
For the other person, traditional just means boring and not innovative.
You know what I say?
It means outdated. What? Yes, exactly, right? Traditional could just mean outdated or boring, right?
Right.
And then you talk about modern training methods and people think, we're using sports science and we're using different modalities and different communication methods to get the information to the students, to find different angles, to convey the information, to make it more functional, and using different modalities to improve the training, right? So for the one person, modern training method sounds great. For the other person, they hear that and it's like, oh, that means they change things. It's not traditional. It's not authentic anymore, right? So when you use any of those kind of words, that kind of language, it's loaded because it depends on the person hearing it. There's some people that think traditional is great and some people think traditional is a bad word. Same thing with modern in the walled garden of Chinese martial arts, right? Progress is not always acceptable. If you could just do things the same way as your forerunners in the most authentic way, there's huge pockets of Chinese Kung Fu people that think that's the best way, even though there's no evidence that any of our forerunners weren't constantly improving this, right? So, so I take a little bit of everyone while kind of, adding my own way of doing things and my own experience, and certainly don't want to do things the way Sifu Liang Teng did it. But many of the beats and ideas and the way I present certain information come from Sifu Liang Teng. Some of them come from my German instructors, and some of them come from Sifu Lao. And you kind of have to come up with your own style because ultimately you're there to serve the students. And that's all I got to say about that. All right, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Kung Fu Genius. As always, don't forget to subscribe to the Kung Fu Genius. Hit that bell for notifications. Support us on Patreon or here on YouTube with memberships. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
Word is I'm a Kung Fu genius. Technique speaks for me, not lineage. Forget Jet Li, cause I'm the one. Many call me seafood, but to you I'm sea gung. And I produce masters. You surpassed us. Your Kung Fu stiffer than corpse and caskets. City Wing Chun is the house I built. Violate the gate and your blood gets spilt. Alex, Richter, always the victor.
Dre and Dreidel sitting in the tree. Fucking in the butt. All right, Dreidel. Do you remember Mike Myers did a skit called Sprockets?
Sprockets. Welcome to
right?
Sprockets. Yes.
And when I was living in Germany, I may have told you this story. When I was living in Germany, one of my Norwegian buddies, he was dating this German chick, and she also did Wing Chun. And she came over. We made dinner. And we would go to. There was an American video store in Heidelberg because there was an American Army base there.
Right.
So we could go to this, like, he's still back in the days of VHS. We could go to this Army video store and like rent like up-to-date movies, right? And while I was there, they had a VHS. It was the best of Mike Myers on SNL. And so I brought it and we're watching it. We're like having a really good time. Yeah. And then comes the Sprockets skit where he's like playing a German guy who's like so kind of like dressed in all black. And, he's very like, he's like the club, like the German from the club, but he's his enthusiasm will never get more than this level, you know what I mean? And he's like interviewing people and he would say, your face is beautiful and angular, right? And then he would say like, and now's the time when we dance. And it would be some like ridiculous electronic stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
And this German girl, she was so offended because she had no idea. I think it was the first time when she was like, oh, Americans make fun of Germans like all the time. They make fun of the accents. Most Americans don't even realize Arnold Schwarzenegger is not German. They just do that accent.
Yeah.
And I think she had no idea. And she was like red. And it's like, bro, if you make fun of Americans, I'll laugh. You make fun of Cubans, I'll laugh. Yeah. You make fun of Germans, like you can't laugh about your own. She was like offended that he would say like that there was a whole thing about making fun of Germans. So and I'm like, oh, please do not come to New York.
No. All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from the Patreons. Lots of gems, lots of isometric holds, and lots of holds.
What?
You know, we always talked about holds. When his energy peaks early or in the middle, he always peters out at the end. Because you have to build up to a crescendo, Annie.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering why y'all laughing. Why y'all looking at each other?
What? You're paranoid.
But y'all look at each other.
Andrew, you could play the video back. You can play the video back.
See the heads go. All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering why y'all laughing.
Dre, you're what's known in the industry as a blamer.
Yeah. Everyone but yourself.
Blame it on the ring. All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from the Patreons. Lots of gems, lots of isometric holds, lots of what are you trying to skim? What are you trying to look up?
Not doing anything.
Yeah! What the heck is that?
Nothing's happening.
What is that? What is happening?
Nothing.
What's happening over there? All right.
What, he's not allowed to smile in his own house? What the
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from the Patreons. Lots of gems. Stop doing it with what are you doing with the eyes, man? What are you guys up to? You guys are kooky. You guys are kooky bastards. All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from the Patreons. Lots of gems, lots of isometric holds, lots of. All right, it's time to do the.
That's a German accent, by the way. Wait, can I tell you something?
All right.
When he did the symbol for isometric holds, and he's trying to do the Chowgam Mantis Phoenix Eye Fist, the Phoenix Eye Fist, he did this one, which is a huge insult in many countries. Okay,
I've got your nose twice.
Yeah, this is not a god. If you do this to someone who's Turkish, they're gonna punch you in the face. All right.
What does that mean in Turkish?
Does it even matter? Jesus.
Yeah, I want to know.
Okay. So I will visibly demonstrate. Do you see those two fingers?
Yeah.
So what do you think this is?
Oh.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah, that's nasty.
So this is an insult. This is the Phoenix. Yeah, he goes like this? And he does the double I got your nose / Turkish insult.
I can't wait for him to do a Phoenix Eye on me in class now. I'm going to be fine.
I'm going to give it to you, Mikey.
All right, let's go.
And by the way,
was the,
German
German's-
accent is not a British accent.
Yeah, you did an English accent.
All right, peeps. On today's episode of the Kung Fu Genius, the genius will be answering all sorts of hot nonsense from the Patreons. Lots of gems, lots of isometric holes, and lots of... And now's the time when the Wing Chun class will be listening to their techno.
Scottish?
Lots of isometric holes, lots of... All right, now's the time that we do the Wing Chun to the techno. Let's get to it. Lots of isometric holds and lots of, all right, time for the techno in the Wing Chun class. Let's get to it.
That accent is straight trash.
Lots of gems, lots of isometric holds, and lots of time for the Wing Chun techno in the Wing Chun class. Let's get to it.
Now's the time in class where we listen to techno, yeah.
Okay.
Now is the time in the class when we listen to techno. Yeah.
He said now is the Wing Chun time in the Wing Chun class where we listen to Wing Chun techno. Dre, did you see the new pirate movie?
No.
It was rated R.
Lots of gems, lots of isometric holds, and lots of now's the time we in the class. Now's the time in the class where we listen to the techno. Let's get to it. All right, peeps. On today's lots of now's the time in the class where we listen to the techno. Let's get to it.
Hey, that wasn't too bad. I thought you were going to let that one go.
No.
But then he turned Italian at the end. Let's get to it.
It's like with his energy, if he has any energy left at the end, he feels like he has to expel it.
So,
Subtlety.
Dre, just do it without sharding out that extra energy at the end.
Lots of now's the time we listen to the Pek of the Tekanazan in the class. Bustaras. All right, peeps. On today's episode of Kungunga, now's the time we listen to class and we listen to the techno. No.
You had it!
No. That was way off.
Yeah, he said listen to class.
In the
Oh,
class.
he did say listen to class, didn't he?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the time in class we listen to the techno.